Okay, good morning, everybody. Hopefully we got some people on. Everybody who's been to here before knows the routine. If you could just tell me in the chat area where you're from. I like to do this to make sure people are hearing me. And I'm still waiting. Here we go. Barry's the first one in Parsippany. We have a very large Parsippany contingent, Dave. Thanks. Amy. All right, great. So we got some people that are hearing us. Hey, Ken, good to see you. Super. All right, so we have people hearing us. We're going to jump right into this. You know that I don't like to waste time. Welcome, everybody. We have a different type of topic today. Normally, we're hearing about taxes. 2 years ago, pretty much, Colleen, Logan, and I started doing these a lot. Is when we started doing PPP, and these have really changed over time. So today's topic, we're going to be hearing about some political effects on business within New Jersey. If you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A. I don't monitor the chat as much, but I do monitor the Q&A. So if you have any questions, put it up there. Ask questions as you go along, as we're going along, because I will, address the questions if it's on topic what the presenter is talking about. A couple other items. We will have 3 polling questions. I'll show you how they work. I'll put one up right now. Here's what a polling question looks like. If you can answer it, I'll give people about a minute to answer, and then we'll move on. But these polling questions are used for people who need CPE, continuing professional education. So while you're answering that polling question, I do want to recognize and acknowledge that while we're talking about politics here in New Jersey, I do know that there are some world and political events that are going on that we'll always be very mindful of, and we're not mute to that. Last thing I'm going to say, the presenter today, David Smith, I've known for a very long time. I've worked with him on advocacy issues in an association that I was part of. Alan Sobel's also worked with him. And while this topic may sound like it's political, the comments today are not meant to be political one side or the other. One thing I've known about Dave is that he is very just giving you the facts, and if you feel that he's being political on something, I'll apologize for him because he's just telling you the way it is in New Jersey. But Dave is a partner at Princeton Public Affairs. He can give you more information about the firm, but they are the largest lobbying firm in the state of New Jersey. As I said, I've worked with him on advocacy issues for an association. I found them to be very effective and connected within the state of New Jersey. And Dave, welcome to the CFO Roundtable.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad. Pleasure to be here. David Smith with Princeton Public Affairs Group. I've been a partner for more than a decade. I started with the firm. Give a quick overview so you know my background. After graduating from Gettysburg College in 1985, I was hired by the New Jersey Dental Association. I thought it was my wonderful personality and skill set, but it turned out that the former executive director had stolen money, and all they could hire was a young kid out of college for one of the director's positions. And in that position, I was able to get exposure and be one of the few, probably the 100th of 1% of people with a political science degree who actually uses it for political science. I right away got registered as a lobbyist. It wasn't my primary duty, but I testified in Trenton my first time in September of 1985, and I was amazed, really, truly respected the process, and everyone I've met throughout the years, I've seen just such a love for New Jersey and a legislature. I was then hired by Speaker Doria in 1990 to come with the Assembly Democrats, which was a very unusual path in my professional career because I was a Reagan Republican. I loved Reagan throughout the 80s. And Joe Doria said, I want you to come advise on healthcare, as I was dealing with New Jersey Dental Association issues, dealing with a lot of both dental and healthcare. And I said, Joe, I'm a registered Republican. I don't know if I can work for you. And he then gave me a 40% salary increase proposal, and I realized that I can't be bought, but I can be rented. So I spent 5 years with the legislature. I was in charge of all of the committees before I moved over to the Princeton Public Affairs Group. So I've been doing this for quite a while. 1995, I started, and one of the first clients that I brought in was the New Jersey Association of Public Accountants. And it was an issue where they were trying to revive, I think 1977 was the last law that allowed brand new public accountants. I really made kind of life miserable working really hard. And when after about a year, the contract ended and the CPA Society came over and said, we want you on our team. So our firm has been representing the New Jersey Society of CPAs for 25 years and have worked on a tremendous amount of issues with a lot of professionals, most recently with Alan Sobel on the bait bill. And both the bait bill and bait law, and the bait cleanup. And it's been an honor, not only with Alan, who is just tremendous, but with the other professionals who are part of that group to bring that law about. So today I want to talk a little bit about politics and policy, what has gone on the last couple of years, what's gone on really the last couple of months, and what to expect over the next year or so. And we'll start with the elections, and then I'll go into really some pro-business legislation, kind of focus on what the governor has focused on, what he will be focusing on next couple of years, talk a little about Senate leadership. There's a major change, which we'll get into, and really those general business issues that may be of interest to you. So the legislature has been rolling along, and 2001, we'll go back. We'll go back to the Democrats controlling the Senate, right, for 20 years since Watergate. Jim Florio, for those that are old enough, came in with the tax package, and which was $2.8 billion, which that number will live in infamy because it dramatically changed the landscape of New Jersey. A number of taxes were rushed through, including the toilet paper tax, which really drew the ire of millions of New Jerseyans. And the Republicans took over the legislature in the 1991 election, and they held it for a decade. They held throughout that time, if you remember, Governor Christie Whitman came in. She was a star in the country. She cut the taxes, and our economy started rolling along. 2001 came. The legislature, with a brand new map that favored the Democrats, ended up taking over the assembly, and they have not let go since 2001. The Senate, it was a 2020 tie, first in my career. I don't know if I'll ever see it again, where there was a co-presidency, which was really interesting. 2003, the Democrats took over. So the reason I give it this background is the Democrats pretty much have controlled all of Trenton, even with Governor Christie, for the last 20 years. The election time came. Democrats' internal polling showed that they were doing very well. They expected to have a couple of seat pickup in the Senate. It was 25-15 at the time. It was 52-28 in the Assembly. Well, on Election Day, it turns out that the Republican internal polls, which showed that New Jerseyans, there's a technical term for New Jersey voters, and that's called cranky. All right. And New Jersey voters are cranky. All you have to do is look at Chris Christie. He's elected in 2009 to clean up Trenton right off a U.S. attorney, for New Jersey. He comes in. He is aggressive. He ends up a relationship, has a bromance with Senate President Sweeney. The two of them end up making some very important changes to the state's pension system and property tax by putting in caps, other things that just never really folks had a political will. So the governor, right after Sandy, he was reelected with, I think, 68% of the vote. He comes in. So after 4 years, he then rises up to 72%, one of the most popular governors in the country. In 2012, there's talk that he should run for president. At the time, the Republican National Convention was in Florida, down on the East Coast and in Tampa, and he is a star. He is a rock star. He's on all kinds of late night shows, but not just the political shows, but he's doing Letterman, and he was doing Conan, and he's a star. Well, New Jerseyans decide we're cranky. The governor, when the Bridgegate issue hits, ends up folks saying, you know what, we decide. Even though, we do like that property taxes are capped, and we do like that taxes have been cut, and the rate of the government growth has been the slowest in decades, we decide we don't like you, Governor. And Governor Christie, in his last 3 years, and this is according to Quinnipiac polls, they've never had a governor in the last 60 years poll under 16% popularity for 3 straight years, which is just insane when you see that he was at 72%. And the policies didn't change, and the politics didn't change. It was simply that New Jerseyans got tired. Well, the Democrats didn't count on that going into this election. They thought all is well. Since 2016 election, the Democrats started 2016 with over 700,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. So you had a built-in base of over 700,000. I mentioned in the 2001 with a map. Well, the 2011 map was favoring the Democrats too. So the redistricting map for the legislature. So they came in feeling pretty confident that, as I mentioned, 25-15 control of the Senate, 52-28 in the Assembly, thinking they'd pick up. The governor was polling anywhere from 6 to 11%. That was the public polls. Election time came. Democrats were counting on the anti-Trump anger because Democrats in 2016, with the 700,000 more registered Democrats, they picked up 400,000 registered voters between 2016 and 2020. So you had 1.1 million more registered Democrats baked in than Republicans, right? For the first time in 50 years, there were more registered Democrats than we'll call them independents, which are non-affiliated, which gave them a tremendous strength right off the bat. Well, those are just numbers. We all know until folks vote, and you had early voting, there just wasn't motivation. The governor, Murphy, had it pulled as high as 58% during COVID. That dropped down. He was literally right around 50, a little bit under 50. The polls started showing in the southern part of the state, which is a more conservative part of the state, that he was losing ground fast. In his last 3 weeks, he lost about 10 points in both the public polling and internal polling. So the election comes. The governor thinks he's going to cruise to victory. It's a nail biter, right? Jack Ciattarelli hits a chord with a lot of voters. He ends up losing by 3 points. With the early voting and a vote by mail, we had about a week delay, but Governor Murphy ends up winning by 3 points. The Senate, and there was a lot of media attention because the Senate president lost, right? Ed Durr down in the 3rd district. Sweeney spends, $1 million on his own campaign. He raises $10 million for other campaigns throughout the state. Ed Durr spent $153 of his own money. Literally, Republicans at the very end threw money in, a couple $1,000s, not a lot. But here's a guy who spends $153, has a populist message, and he beats the reigning Senate president. I'm on what's called the Advocacy Group, which is it's a for-profit private company that has lobbying firms in every state. I know a lot of the CPA members, you belong to these groups for marketing purposes. So I was out a couple of days after the election, and throughout and it's one lobbying firm from every state, and that's all they wanted to talk about was Senate President Sweeney losing. It really was a tidal wave in the southern part of the state. You started hearing, oh, it's a red wave. Well, the reality is that the 25-15 Senate majority only was a 1-loss seat for the Democrats. They lost Sweeney's seat in the 3rd, and they lost Adiago's seat in the 8th district. but they won a seat in the 16th district. So the reality was the Democrats only lost one seat. They went from 25-15 to 24-16, but they lost a Senate president who was an icon and was the longest serving Senate president in New Jersey history. With 12 years as Senate president, that's unheard of. And I can get into a discussion, but it really is the 25 years ago, the legislature, Republicans and Democrats changed how fundraising occurs, and they created these leadership PACs that can get up to $30,000 a year. And that really changed everything because it limited folks that are not, so the Senate president, the speaker, the Senate minority leader, and the Assembly minority leader have this ability to raise millions while others individually do not. And that really has changed the dynamics. It used to be that if you're in leadership, you'd be a speaker or Senate president for 4 years and then you were gone. And now that they're the ones that raise the money, they say in a long time, the Assembly Speaker Coughlin is now in his 5th year as Speaker. That really has changed the whole dynamics. So in the Assembly, so we saw the Speaker, not really in the Senate, not much of a change except for the Senate President. In the Assembly, it was a 52-28 majority, went 46-34. It was a 3-seat pickup. Where were those? I'm sorry, a 6-seat pickup. Really only 3 districts in the 2nd District, Atlantic County, Southern District, Atlantic City area. Republicans picked up those 2 seats. They picked up the seats in the 3rd District, which is right above the 2nd District in the southern part of the state in Gloucester, mostly Gloucester County, and then the 11th District, which is Monmouth County. And that's it, 6 seats. So the Democrats still control 46-34. So they have a strong control. So leadership in the Senate has changed from Senate President Sweeney to Nick Scutari. So what you had was an iron worker, and to me it was really fascinating because this is another part in the state's history. Before you had Speaker Coughlin, at one time you had Vinnie Prieto, who was a building codes official. You had Senate President Sweeney, who's an iron worker, right? You didn't have a lawyer. You didn't have, a doctorate, someone with an advanced degree. You really had a representation, I would say, of the working man. Senate President Sweeney leaving, it really was a major change because Loretta Weinberg, who was a Senate majority leader for most of Senate President Sweeney's career as Senate President, is one of the most liberal members of the legislature. And for an 84-year-old lady, scared a lot of folks. She was politically, strategically brilliant. She was able to work with the Senate president. And while you may disagree with her politics, you really had to like her because she was a good person. But the Senate President Sweeney brought up something to the table. He was willing to put partisanship aside for the good of the state. He worked with Senator Orho, Steve Orho, who's up in the 26th district, who is a CPA, who has been a tremendous advocate for CPAs, for businesses. He worked with the Senate president for many years on a lot of issues, helping to help the Senate president to understand what issues were important to business. The good news is that when we talk about leadership changes for the Senate minority, Senator Orho took over for Tom Kean Jr. Tom Kean decided not to run for Senate again. He's running for Congress. So he wanted to focus all of his attention. He came very close in 2 years ago in 2020, which in New Jersey was a very difficult year as a presidential year to run. Steve Orho was chosen by his colleagues to be the Senate minority leader. He's going to be tremendous. So now you get to Nick Scutari. So Nick is a little different. Nick is a plaintiff's attorney who is also a municipal prosecutor. He makes his living with personal injury cases and workers' comp. So he brings kind of that perspective from Union County, which densely populated, and with North Jersey. So when Sweeney lost, right away there was talk who jumps in, right, into leadership. And Nick was able, because of South Jersey losing. They lost when Jeff Van Drew moved into, who's a congressman now, and into the House of Representatives, and then switched parties. That seat was held by a Democrat, Andrew Zach, who lost. So Republicans picked up that seat in a special election. Then the second district came, and Republicans picked up that seat, Chris Brown. And then now with the third district gone, with Sweeney losing, and with the 8th district, which is Burlington County, gone, South Jersey, which had a lot of power because of those Senate seats and Assembly seats, no longer had it. So a deal was cut, and Nick Scutari from Union County is a Senate president. Teresa Ruiz, who's a Latina from Newark, took the spot as Senate Majority Leader for Loretta Weinberg. So you have a whole leadership panel, and Dick Cody, as you remember, was Governor Cody for 16 months after Governor McGreevey resigned in 2004. He and Sweeney did not like each other. They didn't like each other when they were in office. They didn't get along. There were things that when Senate President Sweeney came in, took away, like parking spots and little things like moving seats around with the less advantageous seats in the legislature. But those two really did not get along. Governor, and by the way, if you ever deal with Dick Cody, he is Governor Cody. Once a governor, you're always a governor. Once a senator, you're always a senator. So he is back in leadership now. Senate President Scutari said, "You're going to be part of my leadership team." He gets along extremely well with Governor Murphy. So it's going to be interesting because for the last really 4 years, Governor Murphy came in, and while he had a very good relationship with Speaker Coughlin, he had a working relationship, because you have to, with the Senate President. Now with Scutari, he's closer really than Senate President Sweeney was. And it's going to be interesting to see, and the first test of this will be the budget, right? So the governor historically does his budget message, which should have been 2 days ago. So when this seminar was scheduled, I was really excited that I would get the budget in brief, which is delivered on this after the governor delivers a message. And we can talk about the budget and what to expect, because that impacts you as CPAs, you just as individuals, and you as representatives for your clients, right? That's a tremendous issue. I deal very closely with Ralph Thomas and Jeff Kaziman around the budget to look at those issues, to deliver messages about what taxes, what taxes are purported under consideration, because the budget, and it's important to realize this, when you look at it, the governor delivers this budget message. And the best way to look at it is the governor's budget message, which has been pushed back 2 weeks. It's delivered on March 8th. The governor's budget message is sort of what my kids used to do for Christmas, is they put together their list, and this is their wish list. And in a perfect world, this is what I would like. For many, many years, until both Republicans and Democrats refined the process, it was a really crazy wish list, right? They put everything in because it doesn't hold any weight. A budget doesn't hold any weight, proposed budget, because what moves is actually a bill. A piece of legislation is introduced that has the whole budget that must be passed by midnight on June 30th, because our CPAs know our fiscal year for the state and public entities is July 1st to June 30th. So the governor puts his wish list together. Well, the legislature said, we're kind of tired of this. So in order, and they changed the whole process around, and it's been about 5 years now, where the governor will give his proposed budget. And if the legislature wants to deviate from that proposed budget, that has to be done in a budget resolution, which is then all of them have to be introduced by the beginning of, they set the date, it's usually around June 8th or 9th. So the legislature, from a budget standpoint, the governor will give his budget, in a week and a half, his proposed budget. The legislature is continuing to meet because we're a 2-year legislature. We meet year round. There are a lot of states that will only meet a couple of months. Texas meets every 2 years for 90 days. New York meets January through June. And then they take off 6 months and do studies, and you may have a committee meeting. New Jersey is year round. We just take little breaks. We meet on Mondays and Thursdays. So we're right now with the new legislature being sworn in on the 11th of January. We're only 6 weeks into a new legislature. Committees have only met once in both the Assembly and the Senate. Voting sessions in the Assembly is not happening until Monday, and there'll be another voting session on March 24th, but there'll be committee meetings. So the legislature is really in full force deciding what their priorities will be. But the governor delivered his budget message. The legislature, after March 24th, will take off until the beginning of May. So there won't be any committees unless it's a special committee, except for the Budget and Appropriations committees. And that's where they will have public hearings throughout, not only in Trenton, but throughout the state. They'll have several in different regions where the public can come in and testify. You're testifying on the governor's proposed budget. This helps the legislature shape via resolutions what they want to do. So they will, start fashioning the budgets really in May, where things start to come together and they realize what the priorities will be. The reason the governor pushed the budget, and this is my first time, I first testified in 1985. So this is my first time where a governor delayed the budget, not because of bad news. Like normally when the governors have delayed a budget, it's because, wow, revenues are coming in a little bit less, because you really have to base the budget on what your certified revenues are. So you can't just say, well, if you're going to increase taxes, then you can assume there's going to be more money initially, but you really have to go with what Treasury is saying and what the Office of Legislative Services is saying, which is a nonpartisan group. So the governor's delaying it because it looks like the money coming in is a lot better. This is the shock, right? We've fought over the last probably 15 years over pennies. There have not been any good budget years. There hasn't been a lot of Christmas trees. Well, COVID started. So we're talking March 2020. We all know, you all know with your businesses, this is a scary thing. We don't know what's going to happen for those in a hospitality, for hotel, restaurants, bars. Really scary what's going to happen. Mandates go into place, things shut down. Governor and the legislature are like, oh boy, what happens if all of this, people don't want to go out, afraid to go into stores, afraid of shopping? Revenues start coming in, and initially at COVID are lower, and they're scared. The first month, it's scared. So the legislature, in the middle of its budget year, because again, July 1st to June 30th, ends up passing a law that allowed the governor to borrow $4.1 billion to pay operating expenses. Now, we've called that credit card governing, right? So it's sort of like if you go out and you're putting all of your groceries on credit cards and you're not paying it off, right? It's not the most fiscally responsible maneuver. The same thing with governing. If you're borrowing money to pay operating expenses, things are not going too well. Well, go ahead and they borrow this money. So now they've got 4.1 billion, and it was set up in order to get a better rate. The provision said that in order to defease the bonds, there's really high penalties. So there's an incentive to not defease the bonds. And this provided a better situation for the state, they said at the time. Well, revenues start coming in after a couple of months. You've got that 4.1 billion sitting in, and the numbers, it turns out that people are shopping more. They're sitting at home. They're spending a lot more. The sales tax is through the roof. Other business taxes are through the roof. So they're flush with cash. Then the feds come in, and the feds give us billions. Well, now we're in a situation where we are flush with cash. This past budget year, the governor ended up doing something which was really unusual. He made a $1 billion payment towards our pension system. And because of that, and that was done at the end of June for July 1st, that are, and if I put up a graph, you'd see it. Starting with Chris Christie, I think we had 9 credit downgrades during Chris Christie, and that continued during Governor Murphy. It just continued to be bad news. That affected our ability to bond. It just means it was way more expensive. Our debt was out of control. Our pension liability is at $96 billion and was one of the 5 worst in the country. There was pension reform that was done under Chris Christie, but the problem was that was supposed to solve the issues. But when you had some money left over, that money was not allocated towards that pension obligation, so that kept growing. This past year, with that additional $1 billion, it was and I'll say this, I'm a Democrat, but I'll say it was very undemocrat-like, right? To pay down debt, to do the fiscally responsible thing. So the governor paid down debt within the last month with extra money that we had, and they paid down the pension liability. So that places in a better position. So governor will deliver his budget message. We'll get through this year, and hopefully in this budget will be the utilization to pay down more debt. But New Jersey's also struggling with, and this is the Democrats who are in control, they're hearing from a lot of folks on the ground who look around the country and see that the challenge becomes, you have this ARP money, right? The American Recovery Plan money. We had over $6.1 billion that's come into our coffers. We've used a little bit of that to pay down debt, as I mentioned, but we have a lot of money that's going to be used for infrastructure, for transportation, for water, especially for water, for sewer. There's a fight going on how much you spend for the water systems, because I think we have a $10 billion problem, and there's only $1.6 billion. That's just water alone. But we have an aging infrastructure, both in our water, sewer, and transportation. We've had a transportation trust fund under Governor Christie that was renewed and put more money with a gas tax into those projects. But we're getting to a point where that money is being used up and paying debt service. Because what they do with the gas tax is the money, it's not like you're spending what you get. They take that money and they borrow. And then out of those, with the Transportation Trust Fund bonds, they're using the gas tax money to pay that down. Well, that's good when gas is $2 a gallon. But when you have this global crisis that's going on and gas is at the $4 level, it's not like New Jersey can turn to that gas tax. So there's pressure for from New Jersey constituents to elected officials to say, you have to do something if you can with gas taxes. You have to do something to reduce the income tax in New Jersey. So some states are using their federal money because it's interesting, like the federal money has strings attached. And you could do things, and I know like New Jersey's using money also for its telecommunication infrastructure, safety, kind of EMTs. They're using money there. But if you're using the federal money for these infrastructure improvements, that means the normal money that's in the budget for those types of improvements, you can use for other reasons because you're not tied to it. So the big debate will be, are there going to be enough Democrats who were not happy because, and I'll take a step back for the election. I talked about the legislative elections and the governor, but there are a lot of local elections which Republicans took back some towns. The Republicans had a clear on a local level, definitely did way better than Democrats did. So Democrats are saying, well, you know what? We can possibly use this money to reduce taxes. And that's something that that we'll see whether it becomes a tax reduction or whether it becomes an investment, because you then have the progressive Democrats who are pushing, saying, because we have this money, we need to do more early childhood education. We need to put more money into the education system. Brad, say something.
Yep. So hopefully I don't echo. A couple of questions. I know Kate is going to be interested in hearing this because I know where she works. What is this? Are any of these funds, when you talk about transportation, does that also come into play with the Newark Airport Terminal 1A? I don't know what they're going to call it, or any of the changes there, or is the transportation purely roads and rail?
Yeah, my understanding of the Transportation Trust Fund, it's not going into and bridges and tunnels that the money can be used, but the TTF money is earmarked for New Jersey, because keep in mind the Port Authority is the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and they have the ability through the tolls, right, to issue bonds. As you talk about Terminal A, I'll put on a different hat. I'm one of the founders and vice president of the New Jersey Hall of Fame. For those of you who are traveling, hopefully you will see more, not just there at the terminal. We have an amazing exhibit. It's opening up. But yeah, that fund, it's different on when you're talking about the Port Authority. They're getting their money from a different source, and that becomes political, right? On who does the New York get it? Do their airports or our airport gets the money? So and then you get to the bridges and the tunnels. Which is all the issues, but our infrastructure is aging. It's pretty scary when you look at, and they're trying to get around to it, but because we're a pass-through state, that there's so many people, a corridor state, we get a lot of use, and it's very hard to keep up with that. And we're also, because of the lack of a cohesive mass transit system for the entire state. A lot of New Jersey, we need cars, right? So that puts a lot of impact on the roadways and the bridges. That's the Port Authority has its unique challenges, but they have a pretty aggressive safety and replacement system that they're working on. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. So Stuart asked a question. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, but I have to ask it. And since we're flush with cash, I figure it's a good time to ask this question. And his full statement is, and I'll let you take a drink too. We're always talking about how to make New Jersey a better place to live, ... What can we find to make it a more friendlier, healthier neighborhood? What can we do to finally get there, and how long will it take?
Well, that's a $1 billion, trillion question, Stuart. So absolutely is on the minds, right, of everyone, which is how do you make New Jersey more affordable? And when you listen to the governor's State of the State, he is saying that, you know what, this is something that I heard the public saying that they can't afford to live here. There are certain things that really surprise, right? Number one, we hear, oh my God, everyone's leaving New Jersey, right? We've heard that for many, many years. Well, they just did the census and we gained 1 million people over the last decade. We have 1 million more people than we did with the census 10 years ago. We heard that, oh, millionaires are leaving the state. Not true. I think the number is 10,000 more millionaires than we did a decade ago. So it's things like that and it's funny because when I talk to a lot of my friends who are in New York, they're like, yeah, it's only because the New York people, right, are moving out of the city into New Jersey, right, and they're bringing that wealth. But there is that fear of that the ultra wealthy leave the state. Then they go down to either no tax or low tax, right? Southern states, which is always a fear. It's discussed a lot in Trenton, but the challenge becomes like, what do you do, right? We have by various metrics the best education system, top 3 in the country, right? So it costs money for property taxes. That's expensive. We're number 1 in the country. Our corporate business taxes, number 1 in the country, right? Well, that makes us less competitive. But on the other side, we do, when you look next to New York, we do look a little bit better. So if you want to be in this region, companies are willing to make that investment. There are different areas that, and I know Brad and you and I were talking, New Jersey has per capita the greatest number of scientists and engineers in the world. It is, we have brilliance here in our state, but we also have that dichotomy. Folks know about the wealth that we have in Alpine and Bergen County, and parts of Ocean County and parts of Monmouth County, and even parts of Hudson County, right, between the Hobokens and the Jersey cities, and Morris County and Somerset County, we have the wealth, and then you have the really poor areas like you do in Camden County and Gloucester and Salem, Cumberland counties that are really poor. So the elected officials keep talking about doing the right thing, right? But I think that until you start lowering the income tax, until you start lowering the corporate business taxes, that you're not going to really entice that investment. I don't think companies are going to leave here in New Jersey. They're not going to leave the state, but when they have capital to invest, and I know several manufacturers, one that's a client of mine, the time comes to allocate capital. And where do you put that capital for growth, right, for expansion? And the challenge is, are they putting it here? Now, to the governor's benefit, when we look at what has the governor's successes been, he's really looked, and there's been 4 pillars that the governor's really looked at. And when I say the governor, it involves the legislature because they're usually on the same page. Those 4 pillars have been.
I started a poll to see if anybody plans on leaving New Jersey since you said that. Before you talk about the governor, Ken asked an interesting question. He said some states, including Connecticut, don't have county governments and associated bureaucracy, taxes, etc. Why can't New Jersey do that? And I don't know if that's a home rule question.
Oh, you know what? That's a great question. That I staffed the state government committee. I did mostly insurance and commerce back when I worked for the legislature. But that was a question back then, right? And back then, so you're talking 30 years, right? 32 years ago, 1990, 91 through 95. The question was, we have too many municipalities. We have more municipalities per capita than anyone. Why do we need 500? And this was back then. Why do we need 567 municipalities And why do we need 21 counties? Question. You've had bills introduced over 30 years to consolidate. 32 years later, we went from 567 municipalities down to 565. You had Independence in Morris County, which had 4 people that said, okay, yeah, we really don't need a government with 4 people. And we had Princeton Borough and Princeton Township merge. That's it. Really, we've lost 2 towns over 32 years. Challenge is home rule. I live in Hopewell Township in Mercer County. So you have Hopewell Township, which if you start at one end and go around, it's 52 miles. We surround Hopewell Borough, which is 1 square mile, and Pennington, which is 1 square mile. They are the donut holes. So do we need 3 governments? And we do a lot of shared services, but even in something where it makes sense, like in my town, because we're all shared. We have a regional high school, we have a regional police force. I mean, we have a police force. We can't do it in this town. So a couple of years ago, Riga Sora, who's the mayor of Trenton, was an assemblyman, puts in a bill, and he says, you know what's ridiculous? If you look at LBI, there are 9 towns on LBI with 90% of the residents being summer residents. You don't need 9 governments. So he put a bill in to force those 9 towns. Well, guess what they did? Those 3 legislators from the 9th district put in a bill to force Hopewell, Pennington, and Hopewell Borough to merge. They didn't. There's a lot of power that local officials have. There's a lot of contracts to local officials. There are municipal engineers and insurance brokers and attorneys that are prosecutors that they get the contracts. There's just a lot of investment in the current system. And unless it comes, and Steve Sweeney, and I'll go back to him again, one of the things he looked at was shared services and says, you know what, we're not going to force people, but we've been giving the carrot for 30 years. The carrot doesn't work. I want a stick approach. And there were some, it's called LUBARC, which was a commission that was set up to force kind of real regionalizations. They haven't met in like 5 years. Unless there is a carrot, which is legislation passed to force towns, the home rule is going to win. And forget about counties, right? So you have huge counties, and then you have a county like Warren County, which has, I think, 60,000 people compared to 1 million people in Essex, right? No one wants to get rid of any of the 21 counties. So it's home rule, because the folks that are in elected positions. On a positive note, there is more talk of shared services. And there were a couple of initiatives that have been tried with health departments, with dog catchers, with even some in a couple of counties, some assessors where you're doing county assessing or modernizing assessing. But it's home rule, Brett.
Sorry, I had my mic on mute because I'm just watching the time. I know that you were going to talk about some industries that are being affected. Is there anything in particular that look like they're going to be good or bad with the administration?
Sure. So there were 4 pillars the governor is really focused on, and surrounding them, the 4 pillars was a $14 billion program. I know, Brad, you and I have previously talked about the Emerge programs and the Aspire programs, which have taken over the GROW programs. The governor, rather than going into tax breaks, has chosen to focus on economic expansion through tax credits. It's just a theory. Again, his $14 billion through the program. It's only been a year, and it's so within 1 month of the first program being implemented, it was amended and already changed and expanded. Now we're about a year into it, and some of those are beginning to come to fruition. The industries the governor has chosen winners and losers. We'll start with cannabis, right? The governor made it one of his pillars to have to open up the medical cannabis, and that has happened, and not fast enough for some, and not enough really price controls for some. Does not allow homegrown, but the recreational, which some believe should have been online, right? So there are two ways to go about securing recreational. One was a vote of the legislature, signature by the governor. They couldn't get the votes in the Senate, so they had to go to the public. The public approved it. For those that support cannabis, that's a better way to go, because now you need a constitutional amendment that our Constitution permits cannabis now. So if you want to end cannabis, you have to go to the public and they have to vote it out. So cannabis is one. They really are close. The Regulatory Commission has issued licenses, and they've got several different licenses, for you to go, and they try to focus on also micro businesses for women and minorities. But we're still a couple of months away from recreational being rolled out. That's one of the pillars. So if you're in cannabis, that's a good area. I know a lot of the firms have focused on it. Renewables. The governor came in wanting to be the cleanest governor. When it comes to renewable energy, that's not good. There's sort of winner and losers. If you're in wind, you're a winner, unless you're in Ocean City, which is fighting Ørsted. It's a challenge. Wind sounds good when it's not off of your shores, when it's not visible to you. So there's been a focus on wind. There's been a focus on solar. So all renewables is going to be a winner. Losers in that same area are propane and any fossil fuel. The governor put into play an energy master plan, which is and natural gas, a loser, puts into play that you're electrifying his state. You're going to stop all new, I believe it's by 27, 28, all new homes from getting propane or fuel or natural gas. It needs to be electric. The Energy Master Plan is focused on cars, turning it around. There are more e-car benefits and programs for electrification of the e-cars, for e-trucks. They put provisions into place for awards. There's a $63 million fund from the Volkswagen settlement. There was a fraud settlement for Volkswagen on its emissions. So the state has been giving grants out to even for the electrification of forklifts and others where you've used, even seeing clean energy. The challenge becomes when you talk about electricity, it's got to be made, right? So there is a carbon footprint to make that. No one ever talks about that. They say, oh, e-car, it's clean. Well, if you look at the carbon footprint, it's not as clean as you think to make that electricity. So the winners are going to be, at least for the next 3.5, almost 4 years while the governor's here, that it's going to be anything that involves electrification. If you're involved with fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, or propane, it's bad. Governors also focus on film and TV studios, right? That's part of that $14 billion. We used to have a tax credit program and ended with Governor Christie, who said, I'm not going to pay for Snooki with a tax credit. That program was revived. It was a $75 million program. It was successful first year, bumped to $100 million. And then with the new program, it's up to 3 pillars that is focused on $300 million of tax credits for film and TV. But the majority, 2/3, for those that are committing to long-term leases in studios. So it's interesting. The governor increased the tax credit for there's a 2% diversity tax credit that turned to 4% if you have women and minorities in your cast and crew. But this is focused. So our tax credit program has a definite slant, 2/3 going towards putting the carrot in place for the studios to be built where you can have the permanent jobs. So it's not transient, and you can't say, wow, it's big Hollywood. These are must be domiciled in New Jersey, must have New Jersey. They must be based here. So they set up, the LLCs in New Jersey. But that is a big focus. The governor sees the jobs coming in. We did $500 million. And another one of my roles, I'm in my 17th year as commissioner on New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission, vice chair. We're promoting the state place to shoot movies and television, and our phone is ringing off the hook. We have more than within a year, you'll have a dozen sound stages that are huge, with some of the biggest in the country coming. And again, these are permanent jobs. So that's a big investment. Gaming. Governor Christie's leadership, they went to the Supreme Court and permitted the gaming for New Jersey to get into gaming. We have, with the online betting and with the gaming, there have been tremendous expansion into those fields. It's brought in a lot of revenue. There's server farms down Atlantic City area, creating lots of jobs, providing the services. There's going to be more that's done, I think, over the next 4 years. So cannabis, film, TV, gaming, and clean energy, those are the really pillar of the governor's. Over the next 4 years, life sciences. We know New Jersey with its pharmaceutical companies. This is where the jobs are. That's the number one thriving. ROI just did really kind of a poll of its economists, and they were talking about those industries, technology, innovation. So here in New Jersey too, we're having companies that are growing here, investing here. That's our second fastest growing industry.
Wow. So I'm just looking at the time. We have 4 minutes left. I wanted to ask you a kind of loaded question. Makes you nervous. I've sat on committees with Dave, and he's always nervous when I'm ready to ask a question. But you would like this one. Most people are going to hate. Everybody thinks politics is a dirty game, and it could be at times, and maybe many times it is. The one thing that we've known, and I know that we have a lot of clients on here, and I see some accountants. Dave and I have worked on a PAC together, and you know that one of the issues that we've always had are, particularly accountants, are very, very poor at giving. And so my loaded question to you is, and it's kind of dual question: why should people give to PACs? There's always, people feel dirty when they're doing it. And can you dispel any of that? And why should companies? I heard you say you work with a manufacturer, and I'm sure there are people on here saying, "Oh, he deals with this association, that association." Companies should be hiring PACs, or should be contributing to PACs, or people should consider contributing to PACs, or why should they? And what's the benefit of hiring a lobbyist?
So it's when it comes to money, the reality is it's the lifeblood of politics. Right, folks have to run for election. They can't govern unless they win. They can't win unless you're Ed Durr in the 3rd District challenging Steve Sweeney, unless you have money. And he even got money at the very end to get his message. And he won by 2,000 votes. It wasn't like it was a blowout, right? So why you should give to a PAC? Our firm, we're actually one of the largest top 3 in the country when it comes to state lobbying firms. So we have great exposure. We have over 40 associations that we represent. It's always surprised me that CPAs don't give, because there's so much that is done in Trenton. I've been a lobbyist now for, as I mentioned, for the CPA Society for 25 years. My number one priority, as your lobbyist in Trenton, is to protect the value of the CPA designation. That's the most important thing, because if that's diminished, then your ability to make a living, ability to protect your clients, ability to be a valued consultant, a member of their leadership team is gone. There are associations, it's shocking. When I would see there, I think it's 10-1 that your scholarship fund raises more money than your PAC. Your competitors, folks that want to take away services, I want to say, the H&R Blocks, right? Or the Jackson Hewitts, or so folks, they're out there and they're giving money as a corporation. There are groups like the dentists. The dentists give the most per person than any other profession. And you know what? I've never seen an anti-dental bill, because it's not like money buys you, but money allows you access to be at those fundraisers, to show that you care. And as a contract lobbyist, not only do our clients given, it's all public, but our firm gives, right? And it's not deductible, but it could be the best investment is the NJ PAC. It is a bipartisan PAC that rewards people that care about the issues of importance to CPAs. And I strongly recommend that you donate to the NJCPA PAC. I think they do a great job, very judicious. And we're supporting people that support the CPA profession and general business climate, because that's also extremely important.
So the talking about we're right at the 9:30 mark. The last question again that I'll want to make sure they understand is the importance of talking with somebody in your industry to understand how they can influence their legislatures, even at the local level, because you said local does have an impact, even all the way up to the state level. I don't know about federal level, but it's important for businesses to talk with organizations like yourself to understand how they can affect change. Because Alan Sobel started with the bait based on a letter he started writing, and he saw how tough it could be working with the state. And thanks to you and other people, that's how we got the bait law through. So it is 9:30. Don't know if you have any closing comments. I don't see any other questions coming in, but I had a whole list of items to go over, by the way. And you hit on every one of them pretty much. And I'm going to cross off that one. So I want to thank you for presenting today. You have a lot of information. I've heard you speak on it for years. And if you have any final closing comments, love to hear it.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Appreciate working with you all these years, as well as Alan and the CPA Society. It's Jeff Kasman, and it's just a one point. Jeff Kasman has a key person network. If you have any relationship, you let Jeff know about that. That's the value. I've been in Trenton. I know the folks. They're legislators and staff. These are people I deal with. And if anyone has a question that afterwards you think you want to, or just wanted to, pick my brain. I am smith@ppag.com. That's smith@princetonpublicaffairsgroup.com. I'll be happy to answer. I think your society, if your society does a great job. Ralph Thomas and Jeff Kasman really are tuned into Trenton. We've made it a focus of my representation to get them more engaged, and they're as respected as any group in there. So I appreciate it. Anytime you want me to come back and talk about Trenton, happy to do it, Brad.
Great. I appreciate this, and I want to thank everybody else for attending and watch for future presentations. Thank you, Dave.